Welcome back to Bay Sunday, July 23rd, 2011. That was the day that the world lost five-time Grammy Award winner Amy Winehouse. She lived a tumultuous life with her public addiction of drugs and alcohol, but it was really her voice and her famous beehive, her style, that rocketed her to fame. Our next guests are co-authors of The Life and Death of Amy Winehouse. Andy Morris is an international journalist and was a senior editor for the UK's Associated Press. We also have Christina Westover. She's a San Francisco author and a frequenter to Bay Sunday, so we welcome Christina back and we say good morning to Andy. Hello to you two.
Good morning.
Now, she's such an amazing figure to me, and I think so interesting. So tell me a little bit about the book, and you say you start from the very beginning where Amy Winehouse is born in London.
Yep, and she had a bit of a broken home. Her father left her mother when Amy was 9, and that usually has a bit of a negative effect upon children, and it did for a while upon Amy. But actually, it brought them closer together. Mitch, her father, and Amy ultimately spent a lot more time together after he left the marriage, and so they became a very tight unit, you know, and that really was, in a sense, why I was interested in Amy, for one thing, because I'm a father and I have a daughter, so I understand that kind of dynamic, you know, what it's like to have a daughter and raise them, and Mitch was very, very close to Amy, and she was to him.
And, you know, she is such a public figure and so well known, you know, in pop culture, but how did you guys come to want to write this book about her? I mean, were you guys fans?
We were fans, and before anything even happened, before her death, we were already talking about writing this book, and we'd already started working on things about it. One thing we really liked was that she came from a musical background. Not just her father, but also her uncles were jazz musicians. And we just loved the quality of her voice, how it sounded so old-fashioned. It was like listening to Billie Holiday or Ella Fitzgerald, and she was truly visionary in knowing how to use that voice as an instrument.
I mean, just listening to her voice, she really draws you in. I'm also a fan, and so I loved her music because it was so different. And then her style, too, I feel like reflected a lot of her influences, right? She was a big fan of the 1960s girl rockers. Yeah. And you see that in her music, too, right?
But she's very hard to pigeonhole. I mean, it's like if you went into a record store and you were searching for a category that she fitted into.
Where do you put her?
you maybe, at the start of the career, you may say jazz, a little bit of hip-hop, but later, she had a style all of her own. I mean, actually, when people heard her, especially in the US, when they heard her for the first time, I think they pretty much thought that she was an American and that she probably came from the Deep South or something like that.
I had no idea.
And she turned out to be, you know, a white Jewish girl from London. And who knew?
Who knew? But what's amazing to me is that, you know, we talk about her public addiction and everyone knew about it. Was it a case, do you think, that it was going to end up bad? I mean, it almost seemed like there was no hope for her because it just seemed like she had such a hard time with her addiction.
The part that's so terrible about the addiction was that she actually did try. She tried so hard, and she did get off the drugs, and eventually it was the alcohol that did her in. But I mean, seeing how heartbreaking it was for her parents to plead through the media to save their daughter, it wasn't enough.
Where do you think it went wrong? I mean, you talk about how she did try to go to rehab, and, you know, and she talked openly about it.
Yeah, well, in fact, her famous song, the song that made her in the US was
Rehab.
Yeah, it was Rehab. And her saying, no, 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 I'm not going. But of course, she did eventually go to rehab, and that was the key thing. And that got her off the drugs. And by the time that she died, she'd been off the drugs for probably 18 months at least. So it was not the drugs that killed her.
It was the alcohol.
It was the alcohol. And in fact, when she died, people were speculating that it might have been because she quit alcohol suddenly. You know, she kind of went cold turkey, and they said that might have been what killed her. But actually, the coroner's inquest ruled that it was through alcoholic poisoning, because she was 3 times over the DUI limits when she died. You know, she'd gone on what we call a bender in England, you know, a binge session, and she'd drunk nearly 3 bottles of vodka.
Very sad ending. Only 27 years old. Let's talk a little bit about her personal life, though. What did we learn in this book that maybe we didn't know about Amy Winehouse?
That all of her big successes and all of her great music, they all revolved around her relationships with men. And that's one thing that she loved so much about those girl groups from the 60s, was that most of the songs were like those doo-wop songs that revolved around relationships and being in love.
Because passion and love really did drive her, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, the Blake Fielder Civil, who she married, you know, most people regard him as being a negative figure in her life because, you know, I guess he introduced her to hard drugs. You know, she was a user of, let's say, marijuana before she got involved with Blake Fielder Civil, and then that progressed into harder drugs, which were, of course, were a major problem. So most people, and particularly because he spent most of their marriage incarcerated for a crime, you know, but actually she was very much in love with him, and he was very much in love with her, and
to the very end.
Absolutely, yeah. Even though she was allegedly planning to marry somebody else, she was still very much in love with Blake when she died.
It was destructive, but I really think they were soulmates.
Yeah, I think so too. It's such an interesting story that you guys are telling, so you got to check it out. When we say thank you to Andy and Christina, already we are out of time, but you got to check out the book. It's called The Life and Death of Amy Winehouse. You can get a copy of this book at Amazon.com or from Andy's website at andymorris.weebly.com. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back here on Bay Sunday right after this.